Hey you, I'm Sarah Turner. I'm a freelance medical copywriter and copywriting mentor, and I want to talk about 5 red flags for hiring copywriting clients because it took me a long time to listen to my intuition and my gut when I was on a call with a potential monster client. So this is something I hope you can kind of pull from this, and I want to remind you, if you're just starting out, especially if you're just starting out, really truly listen to your gut. I promise it is not worth it. I know sometimes when you're starting out, you can feel that sense of scarcity and that urgency and need for, paying your bills and making that money. But working with somebody who is not a right fit for you or takes advantage of you or just doesn't have respect for you as a freelancer is not worth your time. It's an energy drain. It can suck the life out of you. So I just really don't want you to even end up there. If I can stop that from, just 1 or 2 people, this is worth it. I hope that you avoid these situations. Okay. So what are some of the red flags I've noticed over the years? First, they expect you to be available constantly or at odd hours. Clients who want your cell phone number and want you to respond to them immediately, that is a giant red flag. In fact, I had to start incorporating not responding to emails right away just to kind of set expectations for my clients. So sometimes I would actually wait to respond to them, or I would boomerang an email. So I would respond to their email, but set it so it would go out a few hours later or even the next day, to give myself a little breathing time and to just kind of, make sure that their concerns or whatever was going on had been addressed, it had been moved off my plate, but so that they didn't get used to me responding immediately, because that is an expectation you can subconsciously set for your client. If you respond immediately to all their emails, they're eventually going to expect that. So be reasonable here. I actually have a 24-hour rule. I respond to all emails within 24 hours, and I think that is extremely reasonable. But that does mean that I don't respond right away, and that is okay. The next one is that they request unrealistic turnaround times without paying a rush fee. So if you have a client who's like, hey, I need some copy due tomorrow, and then they're not willing to pay a rush fee, that is a giant red flag. In my experience as a copywriter, it's very unlikely that there is an emergency copywriting situation. If there is something that is needed urgently, it's usually because a mistake has been made or something needs to be addressed, or usually it's because there's poor planning on the client's part or on your part. But on someone's part, there hasn't been sufficient time given to actually plan and properly execute some sort of marketing strategy. So if you have a client who's consistently in a rush and needs things urgently, that is a red flag. Obviously, though, things do come up, and if that does happen once or twice, that doesn't mean that they're not somebody who's wonderful to work with. It does happen. Urgent situations come up, but not as often as you would think. Another major red flag, and I feel like this should be obvious, but for some reason I still have newbies, going for it, is they ask for work for free. Anyone who's asking for work for free right out the gate is a giant red flag. It doesn't matter if this is your first project, still charge something, because when you do work for free, it subconsciously and consciously, frankly, communicates to them that your work is not worth much. Even if you have pretty good copy, they're gonna probably not view it with the same amount of value if they don't pay for it. So keep that in mind. If somebody asks for you to work for them for free, that can be a giant red flag. The next one is they don't pay in a reasonable amount of time. Now, for this one, sometimes I have to work with newbie copywriters to kind of adjust their own expectations here, right? Sometimes they submit their final draft, they expect the full payment right away. And that is not always how it works. If your client takes a few days to get back to you, that's okay and that's reasonable. So it's all about finding that, what is reasonable and also what expectations were set at the beginning. Most contracts include a net 15 or a net 30, where you allow 15 or 30 days for them to pay the final balance before there are any sort of penalties applied. That's something you should consider putting in your contract. But keep in mind that if they are consistently, not paying you on time and you're not already in a situation where you're charging for the full project up front, the first thing I would recommend doing is charging for everything up front. And that's a shift I often make with clients after 1 or 2 projects. Sometimes when I'm starting out, I will do 50% up front, 50% upon first draft completion to kind of give that good faith in me, and so that they feel a little bit better because we've both got a little bit of leverage. I don't do edits until it's paid in full. But when it comes to them actually making that final payment, if they are taking a long time, you can totally switch to a paying upfront payment plan. And I do switch eventually. So I hope that really helps. The last one is they don't respect your process or boundaries. Again, within reason, because any client who's intentionally trying to creep on the scope of work or add things that weren't originally included or ask for more revisions than you guys have agreed to, that is also a red flag. But this is something I want to finish up all of these with, is I want to make sure that you're really examining the expectations you've set and the boundaries you've set, because you set the tone as a copywriter for what your working relationship will look like. And too often, I see newbies get really hung up on clients who are not, respecting their process, but they didn't set clear enough expectations and guidelines from the get-go. So don't do that to yourself. And if you have a situation with a client where you kind of have this weird, I don't feel like they're respecting my process, is this a red flag, or did I not set expectations well enough? Once you have a situation like that, and you will, take the time to pull from it whatever you can. What can you put in place the next time you work with a new client to make sure this situation doesn't happen again? Also, keep in mind, you have every right to reach out to a client and say, hey, I'm noticing that we're kind of missing each other as far as what is expected. I wanted to take the opportunity to really outline what you can expect and what, my process is, so that we can work more seamlessly together. You can absolutely always stop and set new boundaries and expectations. The other thing I want you to take into account is their needs. Sometimes you're going to work with a client who's extremely busy and they're not as great at responding to emails maybe and answering your questions. So with those situations, what can you do to work with your client better? For example, sometimes with really busy clients, I don't send them a list of email questions. Instead, I'll put the questions directly into the doc I'm working from, so that when they open whatever that piece of copy is to actually give feedback on it, the questions are there. Or if I want them to add a personal anecdote or a little story, I'll go ahead and leave a blank spot for that, rather than, hitting them up separately and saying, hey, do you have a story we could use here? Something like that. So make sure that you're working with each individual client and taking into account their personal way of doing things, and make sure, obviously, that if you do make an exception about your process and how you work with them, that it's something that you feel good and comfortable with. Everything is in flux, everything is changing, and it is a much more pleasant process if you are willing to kind of go with the flow, but also have boundaries that keep your process safe and respected. So it's all about that balance. The bottom line is this: trust your gut. If you are on a call with a client and it's your first call together and they are sounding off like red flags and alarms in your mind, trust that gut, go with it, bail. You will find another client. There are so many clients for you to choose from. And of course, remember, not everyone is going to work well together. It's just a fact. Some clients are not going to be a great fit for you, and you're not going to be a great fit for some other clients. That is just a fact. And I think it would be better if we all kind of accepted that together a little bit more easily. It makes life easier when you realize that you guys are just not necessarily always going to vibe. And there is always going to be another copywriter out there who could probably help them, and you will find a client that is a more perfect fit for you. So just keep that in mind. They are out there, and there's no need to work with a client that you really don't enjoy or who makes you dread your work. You don't have to do that to yourself. I'm here to give you the permission not to do that. Go ahead and hit that thumbs up button if you enjoyed this. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. And of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thanks, guys.